The president-elect is hoping the Trump administration grants access to key resources that would streamline work on administering a vaccine. Meanwhile, Joe Biden and his aides are holding their own COVID-19 planning meetings as they wait for government approval. Howard University Political Science Chair Dr. Ravi Perry is joining us right now to weigh in on this. Dr. Perry, good evening to you, sir.
Great to be with you, Larry.
Great. Let's talk about our first question tonight, which is already the administration's plan to respond to COVID-19. We're talking about the president-elect. In his news conference today, he said he wants more testing, a mask mandate nationwide, and a clear rollout for the vaccine. So how is this complicated given the lack of cooperation that we're seeing right now from the Trump administration?
Well, it's clear that the rest of the world has moved on from this election earlier this month, and the only one that has not is President Trump. We have the office of the president-elect being established. We have transition team members being appointed. We have a chief of staff that's been announced. We have media outlets, including this one, referring to Joe Biden as the president-elect, which all says that everyone agrees that the next president is going to be Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. And yet Donald Trump continues to peddle this false narrative using the same misinformation tactics that he was accused of encouraging, remember, that led to, in part, his impeachment with the Ukrainian and Russian scandals from many years ago. And so this is all a pattern for Donald Trump, that he tries to dissuade his own supporters from seeing the facts when it does not suit his case. And the facts in this case is that Joe Biden is the president-elect.
And of course, we're still waiting for the electors to certify that election. It should be happening within a few weeks. Moving on right now to the economy, the president-elect also talked about meeting with the CEOs of General Motors, Microsoft, and Gap, just to name a few organizations that he met with today. He wants a nationwide minimum wage, broadband internet service for every household, and he also wants another coronavirus relief bill to pass Congress. We know that that's a lot on the table for an ambitious administration, but what do you see right now as the biggest economic issue they need to focus on?
Well, let's remember that we are still being impacted each and every day by a global pandemic, that because this current president chose to ignore the facts on the ground for weeks and instead tried to suggest that this was some Democratic hoax. We go all the way back to January and February. We have had hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their lives, and way too many more who have been impacted either because they've been infected themselves or they know somebody that has. And this is really the fault for everyone to understand, not just of the poor leadership that we've seen from the Trump administration, but from the top of that administration, the president, who chooses to use his bully pulpit instead of bringing people together around a pandemic that we should all be, in fact, rallying around, chooses to use that to divide. And so to see the president-elect go and meet with top industry leaders to try to build massive nationwide broadband, to ensure that people like here in DC, east of the river where I live, have access to internet so students can study during this COVID nightmare. And so people who are looking for jobs and are doing schoolwork in addition to having to take care of their families and put food on the table, that they can do so because the internet is there. This is something that I think is more of the things that we can expect from the Biden-Harris administration, where new possibilities and new opportunities are going to be made available to Americans, but it's going to require, in most instances, Congress's support. And so what happens still with the balance of power in Georgia is going to leave some unquestioned marks left as it relates to whether or not these issues are actually going to be able to be passed.
Yeah, all eyes right now on Georgia. Of course, we will see how that plays off with that runoff between those two Senate races there. The balance of power certainly hangs in the balance for both Democrats and Republicans in that race. Dr. Perry, thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time, sir.